Yes. Well, thanks. Those were really great presentations and covered a huge landscape. I would like to go back to the environmental topic, though, that I raised early on in the day. And basically, given the huge challenge of climate change that we're facing, and the potential for promoting olive oil and production and consumption on the basis of environmental benefits, I think we all have a general feeling that this is beneficial, but actually having good data to sell as a case here, I don't think at least I don't have the data I'd like to have to make that case. When we did the Eat Lancet Commission report, we looked at environmental footprints of different food groups, and for beef, we had there are probably 30 studies, life cycle analyses, dairy, quite a few, fish, dozens. But then when we came to olive, we could only find one study, that life cycle analysis that had looked at the greenhouse gas emissions and also potential sequestration. And just, it would be better to have more data. And we know that the results probably depend on the production methodology. The people raking or beating the trees with sticks is going to be different than this big machine operating out in the Central Valley of California. And also, there's systems too that you can have olive groves and sheep grazing underneath, and you can look at that whole system. So it would be helpful. I did see something advertised, I can't remember where it was, just in the last week or so, that each liter of olive oil that you use sequesters 10 kilograms of carbon. And there wasn't a reference for that, and I don't know where that came from. That was yours? Okay. Do you have a publication for that? Basically, it would be nice to have that kind of summary, that statement. It's a good statement if it's generalizable. How generalizable is it, and backed up by multiple studies? So is somebody going to fill this gap? That's what I'm asking.
So, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Willett, for that comment. And sustainability, again, I mentioned earlier where the olive oil world, we want to look for messages that we can own. And I think sustainability is one of them. And within the industry, as you point out, there are different things we can do to improve sustainability. But there's also the question that I would love to see some research or to explore. It's the difference between olive oil as a cooking oil, sustainability, versus other cooking oils, whether it's palm oil or canola oil or soybean oil. To me, that's the baseline we should start from in terms of our messaging, because, again, I think this is a message we can own as an industry, that this is the sustainable choice. And yes, within the industry, there are different, obviously, refined olive oil is not so sustainable as extra virgin olive oil, but again, it's more sustainable than canola oil, for instance.
It's just like with health. You always have to compare it to something else. And that's the right comparison. It's the comparison with health outcomes. So are you going to fund the studies? Who's going to pay it? Do it? No, I don't think we can write a grant to NIH to do that. And the dairy industry did that. They didn't come out looking so good, actually. But it seems like you guys are going to pay for it.
I think that's right, and I think there is some literature already extant that we can perhaps do a meta-analysis at least to get some understanding. So I think that's where we've started. I've spoken to both TASSOS and Vasilis about this.
Let me tell you also, there was an initiative from NIH to put $100 million on to the previous budget, the appropriation of the previous budget for climate change and health, okay? And we could fit something in there. However, it did not pass. So 100 million is minus. So industry at this point is the solution, or private donors. But we did get a promise that this $100 million actually going to be a little bit more for the next budget year. Okay, which I think it's very important. And one of the things, about climate change and health should be connected also with the olive tree and, the nutrition aspect. I didn't say anything, I didn't have the time, but, there are also clinical studies where they're using the olive oil to improve chemotherapy. Okay, and this is what we really need to take advantage of all this information and how we can translate, as I told you before, and we can use that to the legislators, we can use that to the NIH and say, hey, we need some more money. Another important thing, again, with the NIH, since we're talking about that, it's going to be very important, and at least our NIH, the United States people have to realize is there's going to be money on the table for social science. So we better be ready of how we can take advantage of that, okay? Of course, now, it's the olive oil. It's not the only lobby that is going to fight for it. There are a lot of, as we had discussed in Spain, the American Heart Association had a whole report about plant oils, but the entire document, it did not have olive oil mentioned once, not once, okay? So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about how we can really promote. It's very important to promote the studies, to promote any epidemiology, and there is a need of all of us to work together to move forward. There is no barriers, there is no competition in here. We work to promote the lavera that Antonia says, the Mediterranean, I'm not going to say diet, I'm going to say lifestyle, although the diet is the appropriate word, as we heard from Stephanos today. Okay, so yes, we have to work together how to promote this. We have to do more clinical trials. We have to do more mechanistic studies to get more money for research, to get more money for education. What I was really disappointed is hearing that some of the kids in Greece or in Italy or in Spain, they don't have the same passion that, we had when we grew up and having the olive oil, on the table, or smelling this French fries, I call it, the fried tomatoes in olive oil. The smell is different. The olive oil is different. But those kids, they don't like that anymore. They want to go to McDonald's. Yes, you're right. My twins, they want to go to McDonald's. Yes.
Which American Heart Association document did you refer to? Oh, you mean the updated nutrition recommendations? Yeah, so I was part of the committee, but I'm not aware of what you were referring to, because the 10 major recommendations, one of them, of course, focused on healthy fats, monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fat from vegetable oils. And don't recall exactly how the wording is, but certainly people on the committee, have done a lot of research, both clinical research and epidemiological research on plant-based oils, especially I think olive oil, oleic acid, and linoleic acid. So yeah, maybe we have to go back to the wording to say exactly what has been done. Mm-hmm. Oh.
So I talked to Joe that after that I was going to write a commentary on that to circulation, and they have to publish it, because they mention every other oil but not olive oil.
100% support your letter to the editor. I think it would be important for the committee to clarify that. Both Frank Sachs and I were on the committee. So, and a lot of literature that we have reviewed, of course, based on olive oil.
Greg, then TASSOS, please.
The other piece of the puzzle that might be interesting to look at, in addition to the sustainability study, is, and maybe the IOC has done this, is to avoid sort of, olive oil being labeled as an elitist solution or a regional solution. I mean, has there been some study of what could be the potential global planting of olive oil, right? Because if basically, I think people think it's like, okay, well, it's basically the Mediterranean and a couple of other areas, and it's not really a viable solution beyond that. But I think that even if you do the sustainability study, you have to paint that picture of what the potential is. The other thing that occurs to me is that there's a lot of discussion in environmental circles about reforestation to combat deforestation. So can't we be part of that discussion and say, if you're going to plant a bunch of trees, why not plant trees that yield some food product, right? So that's another whole stream of conversation about reforestation. And by the way, Yale has a school of forestry, right? So maybe that's a good project for them. Okay. Yeah, very good.
People that they do work on these areas.
Please, TASSOS, and then.
Just a comment on to add to what Vasilis said. For those in the U.S. and probably a lot of non-U.S. based researchers have heard that the White House is pushing a lot on this Cancer Moonshot Initiative version 2.0. A lot of money. So there's going to be a lot of money flowing into that space of research. The related to this, I think, a point. The other hat I wear, I direct a clinical trial center for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And 2 weeks ago, we got funded a 5-year, $20 million project. The intervention being DASH diet in post-discharge CHF patients. Never happened before in the history of the program to have a nutrition intervention for patients. So that was 2 comments I wanted to make. But I have a question for the bitterness. The issue of people don't like bitterness. Has there been any studies in younger kids?
There is tons of research that looks at whether preferences for different sensory stimuli are innate or learned. And on the innate side of things, the way you demonstrate that is that you take newborns and you analyze their facial expressions. And invariably what you get is a rejection expression when you give them something bitter, something that's quite sour also. And then you get more of a yummy type of expression with sweet and salty. And then with umami, it's somewhere in between. So it's something that's quite strong. And people always say, well, I like bitter chocolate, or I drink bitter beer, or I have coffee every day. But there are a number of reasons why you might override some of these innate dislikes, like pharmacological reasons in the case of caffeine in coffee, or in the case of pungent or chemical heat or trigeminal stimuli. The sensation that you get from eating spicy food, also the fact that it makes you sweat, which links to tropical climates as a way of cooling down your body temperature. So there are some reasons why we do override some of these innate dislikes. But we've done a number of studies where if this is the only thing that you change, liking is going to go down. That is not to say that you're not going to drink bitter beer in the context of a much bolder flavor, same thing with coffee. But if that's the only thing you change, it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you. I wanted to make a quick comment. Every week at the Olive Center, I get at least 1 or 2 calls asking us about how olive oil has a low burning point, and there's issues with cooking with olive oil. And when I look at other oil industries, which is probably where this myth started, I make a reflection on how we need to, or how actually olive oil has not made a really good case for all the advantages it has. When we talk about sustainability, it's clearly, when you compare to other oils, for example, and I'm originally from Ecuador, a big production of palm oil is happening, and that comes with heavy deforestation, and it comes with an incredible amount of soil degradation. In the case of olive oil, you can use marginal soils with very little irrigation, and you have multiple advantages that other oils don't have. The reflection here is how are we able to, of course, the first step is having the studies to compare these and address the issues with other oil industries, but also how do we communicate this message better? I think it's very important when I talk to people about olive oil is usually quality or something negative on these myths. And I'm talking about the general population of the consumers, right? Not necessarily specific groups like ours. But the message of the advantages, the sustainability advantages of olives are just not very clearly translated.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to make several comments. One refer on health claims, another regarding the environmental sustainability, and another regarding the use of olive oils for cooking and education. First of all, regarding health claims, we can consider that in the last 50 years, we passed from 0 studies published on olive oil to more than 17,000 publications on health benefits of olive oil. So there is a very huge evidence on the benefits of olive oils. But the question is, who can talk about these benefits, when and why, and in which way? Because at least here in Europe, the regulation said that the researchers can explain the results of the research. The doctors can make the recommendation to the population, but the olive oil sector, just for the commercial communication, only can use the health claims that are permitted, and in the way they are permitted. So it's a very limited area to explain the consumer, and with a very difficult language. So this is an issue that we have to work on to try to find solutions on that. That's the explanation why after 10 years, there are not these health claims on the levels of the olive oils around the world. This is one of the reasons why. The second thing is about environmental. We have been working in the past in a PEF pilot, in a product environmental footprint pilot before the pandemic, trying to standardize the way to calculate the footprint of olive oil production. But the studies doesn't conclude. So the industry is already nowadays very interested on trying to find the final solution on these calculations, just to permit to compare which is this footprint, environmental footprint, compared with other products. And my last comment is regarding the education and the use of the product. Before we were talking about how to make people to use it, and there is something common in Greece and in Italy and in Spain, is that the main consumer are the elder one, that are the ones that have time and knowledge about the product. So they have time to cook and the knowledge how to cook. And the tradition, because they do since they were a child. Nowadays, the problem, and Monsignor Sanchez Orondo asked about what happened with the young people and why they don't consume olive oil. And one of the questions is because young people, the families have no time and are in a hurry, so they cook less. And the reality in the pandemic is, at least in Spain, we realized that during the month and a half close, people stay at home and they start cooking more. So the use of olive oil increased. So we have to work on teach how to use the product and cook with olive oil, or ask for cooking on olive oil in the restaurant, or ask for formulation on olive oil in the industry, in the food industry, to keep the food cooked with olive oil. Thank you.
Teresa, these are all great things. One of the things that we have to realize, it's not that we're going to the consumer. We have to change the behavior in educating the public by activities like what TASSOS said, community engagement events. So if you make, like, especially in the United States, what we did, and of course it's post-COVID, this can be a little bit more open. Second, how do we educate, how we incorporate what Antonia says, put the Mediterranean diet on the nutrition aspects on school systems? How do you bring that to them to understand? So, and I'll give you a very good example. When my twins, I have 14-year-old twins boys, they're tall, not like me, and they're 6-footers right now, and they're playing basketball, they're playing sports. When I talk to them about when we were having the olive oil, no salad, nothing. When I talk to them and I show pictures and things, how the olive oil can have the anti-inflammatory stuff and everything, guess what they do now? Salads and olive oil. So the idea is, how do we educate those kids? And the kids will go home and they will say, you know what? This is something that we need to consider. And remember, again, for marketing issues, remember that's another thing that we really need to take into account. This is health equities. When you talk for people that they have less amount of money and they go to the supermarket and they see the canola oil with 3 bags, and they see the olive oil, which is $40 on the same amount of olive oil, what are they going to buy?
So,
Right, before I ask my question, I just make a quick comment on the health claims. FDA only consider evidence from clinical trials when they make a decision on approving certain health claims on foods. It means that all the animal studies and cell culture studies are basically irrelevant. Observational studies or epidemiologic studies are considered supportive evidence, not definitive evidence in this process. So to get this kind of claims, I think it's very important to conduct rigorous RCTs on established cardiovascular risk factors like LDL cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar. Of course, you can look at microbiome, you can look at gene expression, you can look at inflammation. All this evidence is not going to be considered as relevant when they make decisions on the health claims. Of course, if you want a specific claim on olive oil, the intervention has to be olive oil per se, rather than olive oil as part of the Mediterranean diet. If you want a health claim on extra virgin olive oil, the intervention has to be the extra virgin olive oil. So I think, the PREDIMED has shown that olive oil as part of the healthy diet or the Mediterranean diet is beneficial. But again, this kind of evidence is considered supportive, not definitive. So I encourage for future research, more RCTs specifically on olive oil or extra virgin olive oil on established cardiovascular risk factors, not the mechanistic type of studies. I think that's an important direction. My question may be a bit naive. Is olive oil production organic? Can you have an organic label for all olive oils? Well, the organic label is very appealing to consumers everywhere. And we know that our food system carries a lot of pollutants I mean, persistent organic pollutants, and many other things. And the organic food industry, of course, has grown tremendously. I was wondering whether using the organic label can, appeal to much broader consumer base.
Yes, since a few years ago, we didn't have organic olive oil or the pasta or anything we had, and we were selling good amount of products. But now that we did the organic, and actually we just got awarded, like for the organic products, we have about 70% up our business. And but also in our restaurant, we educate. We have the olive oil bottle on the table. And we encourage, our staff encourages, the customers, when we show them, they have a Greek salad, the KYRIAKIDES salad, always they say, could you add please some more olive oil because it's very good for your health. And we don't charge for that, but going out, they are buying 2 bottles of olive oil, or they are going to Whole Foods and they are buying, and they're our customers for our products, and especially for olive oil.
The answer, and then Rafi.
Thank you, Francisco. Well, 2 things. Regarding sustainability, yeah, we need to pay more attention for the research, because we know olive tree is a resilient tree which can grow with very low amount of water, with a very low use of nutrients. And we know it could be in certain places like a permanent Mediterranean forest, and it's actually based for biodiversity. There are beautiful examples, and we know it can store CO2. But when you go again to the scientific proven things that you can put it on labeling, it's complicated. It needs more maybe research to put black and white, but I think it's pretty, we know is pretty, well, we think is the most sustainable fat or oil you can find, because all of these reasons, but we need to put it on research. Unfortunately, the IOC is not funding research anymore, but we can help the process. And I have a question, because I'm sorry, I get confused, because when we talk about the health claims and the issue of olive oil, and what I understood is olive oil, can we say that olive oil is good in prevention cardiovascular diseases, or is not as, because I was a little bit surprised. Can we say something as that? I don't know. I'm not talking about a health claim in a bottle. I'm talking because I usually say these kind of things, and I want to know what your opinion, which really matters. So we said this kind of like olive oil helps to prevent cardiovascular diseases for normal people, or we are lying somewhere?
So you want me to translate the FDA language to lay people? But yeah, so the FDA, the language is always very standard. So for olive oil, it says oleic acid, which is high in olive oil, canola oil, and some other oils, has been shown to reduce cardiovascular risk factors, LDL cholesterol, which is well-established risk factor. So when it comes to heart disease, it says may reduce the risk of coronary heart disease. It doesn't say reduces the risk of coronary heart disease. So based on this language, I think you can say that olive oil has the, I guess, the potential to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease or prevent cardiovascular disease. I don't think you can say that FDA has approved olive oil for you to prevent heart attack or something like that. So there is some, I guess, wiggle room when you talk about this kind of languages.
For this type of claims, we really need mechanistic studies. We really need to have even the 3D human structures that you can go back to the FDA and make a claim. It's not only just because when you go with epidemiological studies, they're going to come and say, well, this is association, it's not prevention. That's why you need to move to translational epidemiology.
Rafi.
I have a question for Jean Javer, but if I get his attention. Hi, I have a question for you. Earlier you mentioned that in the United States, there's not much affinity toward the bitter taste. And if we could actually change that a little bit, we could get actually different results. Now here's the question. Have you done studies with respect of what sort of combination could potentially work? Bitter sweet, bitter sour, bitter salt, bitter umami. What other combination can actually work to advantage of the bitter, actually, that can reduce inherently the taste of the bitter?
It goes back to the fact that we are, as I said earlier, we're wired to like fat, sugar, and salt. Sugar signals easily digestible calories. Salt, we need it for many functions. And then fat, high caloric source. And then we're wired to stay away from things that are bitter and astringent because they signal potentially noxious chemicals. You know, in high concentrations, antioxidants are toxic. So it's very difficult to move away from that. And so, yes, you can combine bitter stimuli or pungent stimuli with other stimuli which are going to make them more acceptable in a context of a bolder flavor. And that's the argument I made for, you know, strongly flavored beers or coffees and so on. But if that's the only thing that you move, that you manipulate, you're going to have a challenge because, you know, phenolic materials, depending on the molecular weight, are going to be mostly bitter on the low molecular weight side, and then mostly astringent. So, you know, the trigeminal sensation and a tactile sensation as well, which is unpleasant to most people. Again, the tanning process is astringents applied to leather to turn it into shoes or whatever. So it's a mechanism that we're wired to push back against, and so it's very difficult to override that.
No, but the study that, you know, Greg was mentioning earlier, you know, creating all these sauces that is not exclusively made just with olive oil, but is a combination of other ingredients that could potentially enhance the experience of customers and not solely focused on the bitter part of it. So my question is, which one of these sauces have better potential? Bitter sweet, bitter sour, bitter, I don't know, bitter salt? Or...
Yeah, I think the simplistic answer to that would be anything that's going to mitigate the bitterness or bring it down is going to be helpful. The study that we did with Gemma and with the CIA, we looked at 4 different kinds of olive oil. There was one that was highly bitter and pungent, but the other ones were much milder. And so you can see some differences in the reaction to those. So consumers detect those differences. And you also have the added challenge of the unexpected bitterness or pungency of an olive oil to many consumers. To us, it's to be expected, by to many consumers, to give them an olive oil that's bitter or pungent, and they can say, wow, this is very surprising to me, I'm not used to that. So the initial reaction is going to be negative.
Comment or question by Paul?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment. We talk as a chef, you know, Greg mentioned earlier, you know, the younger generation and chefs, I think, are going to play a pivotal role in this. I think what Gemma, what you and your family are doing has been remarkable. In 2009, I was invited to UC Davis for the Beyond Extra Virgin Conference, and I thought I was pretty educated. I had traveled extensively in Italy for more than 30 years before that. And I sat there and I kind of got up from the conversation and sat next to Paulo and tasted some of these oils. And he showed me a 2-year-old oil and a year-old oil and a fresh oil. And I was just shocked that I was so ignorant, as educated as I thought I was. I walked out saying, I know nothing. And it brought me to the beginning, which was going back to my experiences. It's about taste. And so, Greg mentioned the young factor, how important it is. It has to be delicious. So I began immediately incorporating the olive oil and or other ingredients that add a small amount of bitterness, whether it is wilting a few leaves of rucola in something to add a touch of bitterness to it, because I think it's an educational curve that has to happen. I grew up in Milwaukee, Middle America, the Midwest. I can assure you, when you talk about sweet and salty and fatty, you're looking at them. But then over the years, as I became immersed in the culture of the Italian cuisine, it became this driving force to find it. So when I did a restaurant in Las Vegas, we focused on Mediterranean fish and olive oil-based cookery, and therefore almost all of our sauces were raw sauces, or whether it be salsa grumi that was made with citrus and oil, whether it was a salsa di acciuga which had some vegetables and anchovies in it. But there was always something in it to mitigate it, and I always lended myself to the more powerful oils because I always felt like I wanted the guest to go, wow, this is different. And then by finding the balance in taste, and I think the most difficult thing to define is taste, but that is the definition that allows the guest to eat something. And I think that as chefs, we're going to have to be the people that have to begin and drive this forward and create this experience. It's a lot. I mean, when you talked about wine, I'm getting long, I'm sorry, but when you talked about wine, I mean, let's face it, there were winemakers, whether it be, in the early days in Napa Valley. Look where we've come in 30 years. I think that we are right we're getting close to this tipping point. I don't know how we get there, Gemma, but I am there with you 100%, trying to figure it out. And in our restaurant, we'll talk more tomorrow about this, but in my restaurant, I am always offering choices. I'll give you, you're studying coffee, and we talked about this earlier, in the world of bitter coffee, right? So in my little trattoria, I have people that come in and they say, I'll have an espresso. So for me, when somebody orders cafe or an espresso, I know I have a foodie instead of American coffee or cappuccino at dinner. So we immediately offer them two choices, tostatura scura or normale, because I serve illy. And people immediately stop and say, well, wait a second, what's the difference? And it's that moment when the staff is trained to bring two espressos and just say, I choose which one, taste them next to each other. And it's the explanation that Maria said about her oil, or what you have done, which is beyond anyone else, is showing, and the way you light them up and the way you can see it, it's transformative. We have to find a way as chefs to move the needle, which will then move the consumer. And right, Greg, it starts at the high end of the market, not the elitist, so that eventually we'll get to a point where just good olive oil is not only healthy, but approachable and affordable, and it's done in a way that the planet will benefit from having more olive trees rather than less.
Yeah, actually, that's a wonderful note to close on. We have a little reception waiting for us. So it's been an amazing day of discussion and presentations. Thank you all. And let's enjoy some fresh air outside, and then the chef is working on our dinner. Thank you.